Thank you very much.
There you go. It's
Okay,
open to you, Paul. Thanks a million.
thanks, Declan. Sorry, just trying to see if I can put the notes up, or sorry, the slides up. 1 second. No, it's not working.
So if you just hit the share on the bottom, the green
Okay.
arrow at the bottom,
Oh yeah. Sorry, there was a second
and
share actually.
let's
Are you able
start
to
it.
see? You able to see
Module
slides now?
one. There you go.
Perfect. Super.
There we
Okay.
see it.
There you go
Okay.
there. Okay, great. Thanks, Declan. Hi, everybody. Hope you're all well. For those of you that I've met before, great to get the chance to talk to you again. And for those of you that I'm meeting for the first time, good morning. And it's very nice to make your acquaintance. So my name is Paul Daly. I'm not currently working in the credit and collections area. I've taken a sidestep in the last number of years, so I'm now doing something else. But I have worked in the business for 14 years in total. I started working with Oracle way back in 2002, and then moved on to Philips. Both of those teams I worked with were managing French collections teams, and then I moved to what eventually became Accenture, and worked with one of their diamond clients for a further 12 years there. And I did every with a well-known software company. So I did pretty much every line of business. I did collections, I did risk, um, and I also managed it geographically as well, which is quite handy for the course that we're gonna do this morning. So, but anyway, that's just a quick introduction. I suppose most importantly, going way back, kind of 15 odd years ago or so, I was sitting where you're sitting now. So, I was one of Declan's students. Although back then we did not have Zoom, we were in Trinity College. But anyway, and I've been working with Declan for the last kind of 12, 13 years, I think it is. So anyway, that's just a quick whistle stop introduction as to who I am. So what we'll do this morning is we only have half an hour, so I'm not going to get into any massive detail on anything. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you on a quick whistle stop tour as to some of the topics that we're going to be covering into the International Credit Management course. So that'll give you, if you've already decided that's the one you want to do, then that'll give you a good insight as to what we're going to be covering in the weeks ahead. And if you haven't decided yet, I'll be doing the law one just afterwards. Invite you to attend that as well, and you can make a decision as to which of the two subjects you think would be most suitable for yourself. Okay. So there's no need to take any massive notes or anything like that. You can anything that I cover off here will be repeated multiple times during the notes. Okay. So we have four modules, okay, and the first one, not too surprisingly, is module one. And what we're going to do is we are in module one is we are going to start off by giving you an idea as to what international business is. So I suppose if you stop somebody on the street and ask them, okay, what's international business, they're probably going to say, well, it's importing and exporting. And yes, that's certainly a key factor in international business, but it's not the only one. There are additional options that companies can embark upon. They can source raw materials from a country and then move them to a country where they then create a finished product, and then they can ship it off to another one. You have companies who may engage a workforce in a particular country, the people in that country may be providing no service whatsoever to anyone in their country, but everything may be for international. So that is for an international market. So that is another way that you can engage in international business. There is what is known. I mean, going the whole hog, I suppose there would be what is known as foreign direct investment, and that's the one that the governments of various countries are most interested in, because it means putting in factories, warehouses, shops, that kind of thing, and it also obviously involves hiring people. So it creates employment, and employment creates tax revenue. And all of this is very topical at the moment with what's going on in the United States. Okay, so international business very much to the forefront of regular, not just business news, but also regular news as well. So those are a variety of different kind of ways in which one can engage in international business. Um, we're going to talk about the growth of international business. International business really began to take off post World War II. Okay, so the alternative to countries going to war with each other was to actually engage in trade with each other. And part of the logic was, okay, if you're engaging in trade and you have a win-win relationship with your neighbors, you are less likely to wreck it all by going to war over potentially something maybe minor. Okay, which not World War II was minor, but there may have been skirmishes further back in the past that may have been started a bit too easily. So the prospect of avoiding war was one of the drivers that started international business back in the 50s. It grew gradually over time, and then obviously really began to take off when the internet arrived, because that made it an awful lot easier to do some of the things that previously had to be done without technical support. Some of the drivers of international business over the last few years have been growth markets in large countries such as China and India, where a growing middle class has emerged, and they have income that they can then spend. Countries like America and countries in the EU have looked to outsource some of their work to what are seen, maybe a slightly derogatory term, but is sometimes seen as maybe lower cost locations. So they've taken the opportunity to move some of their businesses out of countries and into others. So again, that's very topical in the US at the moment. And then obviously the technological advancements of the last few years have meant that international business has grown. We're going to talk to you a little bit about international services. Okay, so international services is a very, very big business in Ireland. If you go to the IFSC in Dublin, you have bank after bank after bank, most of which do not provide services directly to Ireland, or Ireland is a relatively small portion of the services they do, but they provide services right across the world in the banking world. And then nearby, you have companies such as Google and Meta, again, floors and floors of people who are all providing services, some of which may be for Ireland, but an awful lot of it is for beyond Ireland. So Ireland, international services is a very, very important part of the Irish economy. We'll talk to you about who participates in international business. So you have what is known as, and we're going to explain to you what a focal firm is. So you have the company that does provides the actual product or service that is sold, but they're not the only ones. You have if you're shipping products, for instance, a very key part of the equation is companies getting the product from A to B as quickly and as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. So you will have companies that don't actually make anything, but they do, but they are very much involved in transporting products from A to B. Okay, so you have those type of companies. You have companies who again don't make anything, but they have expertise in the legal requirements to ship goods. I mean, it's not necessarily, you can't just necessarily wake up one morning and decide you're going to ship products to China. There are obviously kind of requirements that you will need to fulfill. There will be legal things, there will be tax things, there will be forms and so on that you will need to do, and there are companies that specialize in that. And then obviously you have other people. You have the customer, you have the government, so as I mentioned earlier, are interested in it because it will create employment and it will mean tax revenue. And you also have things such as born global firms who may have decided, okay, there is no significant market in Ireland for such a product, for whatever product it is that I'm going to create, but if I ship it off to another country completely, there may be a very, very broad market. Okay, so they may say there's no market for whatever it is that I'm selling in Ireland, but if I offer it to China, there will be millions of people who will purchase it, and as a result, they skip Ireland altogether and they go straight internationally. Okay. And then finally, some of the benefits of internationalizing. I mean, as I mentioned, some of the benefits for society earlier on I mean, it does mean that we cooperate and we work better together. There may be learnings from technology that can be shared an awful lot easier. Sustainability and climate change can potentially be helped. You can argue it either way, but could be potentially helped from internationalizing. But obviously, there's an awful lot of benefits to the firms because that's why they're involved in doing it in the first place. So if the market is saturated in a particular country, they can go abroad and say, okay, well, what if we went abroad and maybe the market is not quite so saturated in a different country, so maybe we can make some more money there. Ireland is a great country, but it is a relatively small one. So the absolute max, if you're going to sell one of every product to every man, woman, and child in the country, the max you're going to hit is about 5 million of your products. If you open it up to just Europe, and never mind the US or Asia or beyond, you're opening up a market of many hundreds of millions of people that you can potentially sell your product to. So the opportunities for firms, particularly in countries such as Ireland, where the local market is relatively small, are pretty big. Okay, so all of that is going to be covered in Module 1, which you'll be receiving not this Monday, but the Monday after. Okay. Just before I get on to Module 2, I'll just leave those countries up there for a moment so you can have a quick chance to read it. Are there any questions about Module 1? Nope. I only asked I asked the questions, so it gives me the opportunity to take a gulp of something. Okay, so module two and module three are very much interwoven. Okay, so what we do in module two, and that we continue on into module three, is we talk to you about the biggest economies in the world. Okay, so there's 12 of them, and then there's another eight that'll follow on in a minute. Okay, um, so what we do is we talk to you about the biggest economies in the world because these are the ones that you're probably most likely to be dealing with if you're involved in some sort of international business. Okay, so there's the first 12. I will call out if you look at number 11, Russia is in there. Okay, now Russia is obviously a country that at the moment there is not an awful lot of international. There's still international trade. It's a little bit more hidden, but there's not very much of it between the West and Russia, or any of it really between the West and Russia at the moment. Now, again, with the change of regime in the White House and some of the noises have been made this week, it would not be impossible that some of those relations might be resumed. I don't think it's going to happen between the EU and Russia anytime soon, but between the US and Russia, you never know. So that could resume. But we have left it in there, even though there's not necessarily an awful lot of trade going on. But it's very interesting, some of the details, and I'll go through some of the details as to what we're going to cover off in a minute. Okay. And these are this is in module three, but these are the other eight. Okay, so you got Spain, Australia, Mexico, Indonesia, Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Switzerland. Okay, so they make up the 20 that we cover off. So 12 of them are in module two. The remaining eight are in module three. Okay. So what do we actually cover off when we're going through those 20 countries? Well, there's a number of kind of things that we do. Okay, so we're going to give you a background as to the country. Okay, so if you've worked with, I've been lucky enough, I've worked with people in pretty much all of these countries. Okay, and I can tell you the notes are extremely accurate. Okay, now there is an element of stereotyping. Okay, not every Americans. If you think of Americans, you might think confident and confident. I'm not trying to stay away from words like brazen or cocky, but there is a confidence that comes out in most people in America, but not everybody in America would fall into that bracket. But if you deal with a large enough set of the population, you will certainly come across a large number of confident people who'll be straight over to you and introduce themselves. So we'll give you a little bit of a background as to the country and why it is that there are differences between different countries. Okay, we'll give you a breakdown. This one's very useful. We'll give you a breakdown of the holidays in the country. Okay, so keeping our credit management and our collections hats on for a moment. If you've ever tried to collect large portions of your debt in France during August, or in Italy during August, or from the Middle East during Ramadan, some of this will certainly ring a bell. Okay, so we'll give you some ideas, some of the holidays that you have and that you need to work your way around when you work, particularly in the collections business, because I can tell you from personal experience, collecting money from those countries during those periods is extremely difficult. So being prepared in advance is very important. We're going to go through the differences in communication in those countries. Okay, so we're going to start with verbal communication. Some people talk in certain countries talk very, very fast. Some talk very slowly. Some in terms of non-verbal communication, some of them will be, if you meet them in person, the issue of personal space is different in different countries. Okay, they will make no hesitation coming right up to you and talking, which in some cultures would be seen as borderline offensive. Okay, so we're going to talk to you about those, what to expect in certain countries, what it means, and what to expect in other countries. And by knowing these things, it means if you're going to be dealing, particularly in person, with people in any of these countries, you will have a good idea as to how to approach it. Okay, so that you don't make the mistakes that maybe you've seen yourself in the past, that people may invade your personal space, or may talk too quickly, or may interrupt, or things like that. Okay, we're going to go through some of the basics, which are very important to know when you're starting on your international business journey. How to greet people. Okay, in some countries, shaking hands would be the norm. In some countries, bowing would be the norm. In some countries, kisses on cheeks would be the norm. But obviously, if you get that wrong, you're immediately off to a bit of a bad start. Okay. We're going to talk to you on how to conduct meetings. Okay, so again, if we take the example of the US, if you go to a meeting and the majority of the audience is American, and you sit down and you wait to people to kind of come and talk to you, that if you wait to introduce yourself, almost, sorry, is what I meant to say, you may be waiting a little bit of time. Okay, because they may kind of expect you to do it themselves. Okay, but in return, you will find that you sit down very quickly, somebody will be over to you. They'll tell you who they are, where they are. That might be borderline how much money they're making, and they'll certainly tell you, I am vice president of this, that, or the other. Okay. Alternatively, if you go to portions of Asia, if you adopt that approach, it may not go down too well. So all of these are covered off in the notes to give you a good idea. Okay, what is acceptable, or what is maybe middling, and what is definitely not acceptable in the various cultures that you may be doing business with. We're going to go through a number of do's and don'ts. Okay, so countries do have, every country has its sensitive points. Okay, either because they've been involved in something that they prefer they would never have been involved in, or because they have had something done to them that they prefer had never been done to them. So we're going to cover off a number of do's and don'ts and topics to avoid in certain countries, and then we'll give you any other additional kind of points and so on, which will be relevant to your role in credit control. Okay, which may be worth keeping in mind. Okay, things like how to answer the telephone, how to make a collections call. The norms in terms of how to do a collections call in different countries would vary. Okay, so what is acceptable in one may not be acceptable in the other. Okay, so very, very, very useful stuff, and I can tell you, I've worked with people in pretty much all of the nationalities that are covered off. It is very, very accurate. Okay, I'm not saying that because I wrote it, Declan wrote it, but it is very, very accurate. Okay. So we cover that off. We do 12 of them in Module 2. We don't do anything else in Module 2. We do 12 of the countries, and then we continue on with the remaining 8 in Module 3, and then there's a second portion of Module 3, which I'll come to in a minute. But in order for me to get a sip of water, I'll take the opportunity to ask, are there any questions? No, super. Okay. So module 3, as I said, the last 8 countries are covered off. That's the first kind of 2/3 or so of the module. And then we come off, there is a final section that we cover off, which is the various forms of risk in doing, apologies, there is an L missing on commercial, but the various risks that you will encounter when doing business internationally, because it is not without its risks. Okay. There are some risks to doing business only in Ireland, but they are less. Okay, there are more of them if you start branching out into other parts of Europe, and then if you go further afield, they grow further. Okay, so the first one that is worth keeping in mind is country risk. Okay, there is virtually no country in the world. There may be ones in the world. We talked about Russia earlier on. I mean, there are countries in the world where maybe you may be sort of banned essentially from trading, but beyond that, there's not really any countries in the world which are completely off limits to trade. Okay, but there are very important factors you need to keep in mind. Certain parts of the world, for instance, are very dangerous. Okay, so that's not to say if you want to if you say, well, I can send a shipment of goods to a particular country, and if all of them successfully reach their market and get sold, I will make $1 million. You can potentially do that. That's certainly possible. Okay, but you will probably need to factor in, okay, if it's a dangerous country, I will need to hire armed security to guard my truck as it is going through. Okay, you may need to factor in things like you may even need to factor in things like bribery and things like that if they're common in the country. You need to know the kind of things. If it's a country that's maybe regularly hit by storms, you need to know that, because you say, okay, I need to time it, or I need to make sure that we don't have a scenario where there's going to be a flash flood that's going to wipe away my entire product as I'm going there. You need to think about things like the legal setup in a country. Okay, if you have a legal contract in Ireland, there's a pretty good chance, and one side defaults on it, there's a pretty good chance that the courts will enforce that legal contract, assuming you're on the side of rights. Okay, if you have a legal contract in a completely different part of the world, it may or may not be enforceable. Okay, local people might say, well, to hell with your contract, I'm going to tear it up, and you don't really have an awful lot to stand on. You need to keep in mind, okay, how stable is the government? Okay, is there a danger of a coup as you're sending your $1 million worth of shipment into the country? You need to know that. What are the labor markets like? Okay, if how strong are unions in the country? Okay, and how reasonable are unions in the country? Okay, if you're dealing with a country where unions wield a great deal of power and may go on strike fairly regularly, you need to know that. So all of it can be built in. Okay, none of it necessarily means it's a no, and I can't deal in this particular country, but you need to factor these things in because they are part of the element of risk. Okay. So that's country risk. Currency risk, in keeping in mind that we're probably in the credit and collections business. The nature of credit collections would be that we supply a goods or services now, and we get paid at some point in the future. Okay, so let's say we do a deal today for $1 million, and in May we come to collect our $1 million because we've granted credit terms up into May. $1 million now, and we're going to convert that back into euro. The exchange rate between the dollar and the euro today is unlikely to be exactly the same exchange rate in May. Okay, it may be better, it may be worse. Okay, so we may come out ahead, we may come out behind, but you need to keep that in mind. And there are various ways in which you can avoid that risk. So we'll take you through some of that. Okay, commercial, although it should say commercial risk. That's very similar to Ireland, but it can be what's the word I'm looking for? It can be intensified once you go abroad. Okay, so let's say, for argument's sake, in Ireland, you appoint the wrong manager to run a particular part of your business. Okay, there are certain laws you need to comply with, but you can ultimately maybe dismiss that manager and replace them with somebody better. That may not always be the case if you go further afield. Okay, you may find out that the manager is related to the president. Okay, of the country. You may find out that the local laws state, well, you can sack somebody, but only after 3 months worth of warning. Again, all of these can be built in to your profit margin, but you do need to be aware of them. So the same rules. You might get the product wrong, you might get the pricing strategy wrong, you might be marketing to the wrong thing. These are all things that can happen. But just imagine if you've shipped a large quantity of stock to the other side of the world and you find out, okay, actually there isn't a market for this, and I'm stuck with the stock in the country. Your stock being stuck in Galway when your business is in Dublin is one thing. Your stock being stuck in Australia when your business is in Dublin is a bit different. Okay, so there are commercial risks in both domestic and international credit management, but they are potentially more serious once you go abroad. And then finally, you've cross-cultural risk. And the main reason that we do module 2 and the early part of module 3 is to reduce the cross-cultural risk. Okay, so we're explaining to you what is it like to do business in China, in India, in the US, in France, so that you can be prepared and you can be ready. And that, if for argument's sake, that you need to have somebody who speaks the local language to run your business, and rocking up and only speaking English is not really going to work. If you can prepare for that in advance, you're going to save yourself an awful lot of money. But there is a risk in going cross-cultural, because the cultures are going to be different and more diverse than maybe we see in Ireland. Okay. So that's what we cover off in module 3. How am I doing for time? I got 6-7 minutes. Okay. And the last module is fairly quick, but I'll take a moment. Anyone got any questions on any of that? No, very good. Okay. Lastly, we have module 4. Okay. So what we have in module 4 is we cover a number of different topics which relate to international business and international credit management. The first one is contact strategies. Okay. So again, this is something I'm very familiar with myself. If you are a company and you decide that you're going to go international, there's probably about 4 different ways in which you can manage your collection strategy. You could have all your collectors here. Okay, so you can say, okay, right, we're going to be big in France. Half our money is going to be made from France. But what we'll do is we'll hire French-speaking collectors and we'll base them in Dublin. You can do that. Okay, that's one option. Another option is you can have all your collectors off in France. Okay, the advantage of that is if they need to go and visit customers, it's a bit easier. There's not planes involved. There may be trains or taxis and so on, but you won't necessarily have to have planes involved to go and visit them. So that may make it easier. You can do a combination of the two, or you can maybe outsource it all completely. Okay. My employer is Accenture, so they'd be delighted to hear that you were going to outsource it completely, because they'd be happy to give you a quote for the business. Okay. But we're going to talk to you about the pros and cons of the various different contact strategies. So how do you go about actually doing the collections piece of your work? We're going to talk about customer visits. Okay, if you've done the regular credit management course in the autumn, you will know, you'll remember there was a section on customer visits, which we dealt with. We're going to go over that again in module 4, but you've got to keep in mind again we're talking internationally, so we may be talking hotels, we may be talking airplanes, we may be talking kind of changes in culture, and maybe kind of what is socializing like in the particular countries. If you're going to do business in Spain, for instance, you would be expected to put some time aside to engage in some dining after work. So we'll talk to you a little bit about how to handle customer visits. We'll talk about letters of credit. Again, something I've had some dealings with. I wouldn't say my knowledge is absolutely expert, but we've had some dealings with. But again, when we think about what we were talking about in module 3, where it's risk this and risk that, one of the ways that you can counter that risk, or you can balance off the risk, is through letters of credit. So you have a scenario whereby you maybe have a deal of 1 million, and you allow your 90-day credit terms, but there is an agreement that you can activate a letter of credit, which basically means that a bank will pay you the 1 million, and you use that to discharge your debt. You can use that in order to negate the risk. Okay, so you say, right, well, I have my 90-day credit terms. I'll maybe give a little bit of flexibility. I might let it go to maybe 105 days or something like that. But after that, if I don't have it, I will inform my customer, listen, we're going to activate our letter of credit, and that is used to discharge the debt, which may cause some issues in terms of dealing with them in the future. We spend a number of pages going through the legal systems. Okay, so we'll give you good, as we use, very useful breakdown. If you need to embark on the legal process in a number of different countries, we'll give you an idea. The legal process tends to be slow no matter what country you're dealing with, but then there's slow, and then there's various other levels of slow as well. So we'll give you an idea as to kind of what sort of what you can expect in each case, what sort of documents you're going to need to produce in order to be successful in any sort of suit, and what your likelihood of success is going to be. And then finally, keeping in mind, again, keeping on the theme of risk, another way of negating your risk is credit insurance. Okay, so you may look at a proposal and say, okay, listen, it's very risky to deal with that sum of money in that particular country for A, B, and C reasons. But you may have the option of purchasing credit insurance, so that essentially you're hedging your bets. You're saying, okay, in the event of us never getting our 1 million back, we will get some of it back or all of it back through a credit insurance company, and obviously you pay a fee for that. And in the past, it wasn't recent, but in the past, I've been involved in some of the reporting that has gone on a monthly basis to our credit insurance companies to advise them as to what we have outstanding and what our dealings are. So those are the 4 modules. The format will be familiar to those of you that I worked with in the autumn. It's 4. It is 4 short tests, okay, and then 2 longer assignments that we're going to do. So that's going to be over the coming months between now and I think May or so. And that's what we're going to be doing, sending the notes out every 2 weeks as normal. Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. Thanks very much. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of international credit management. So well done on that. And obviously the notes will bring more detail and more clarity and all that kind of good stuff. So well done. I'll just stop the recording here now, and